You're a UFC fighter. You have an amazing story. You grew up in a very rough neighborhood, and then you're now fighting across the globe.
I was in debt. I was renting a room out of my house. At a certain point, I was like, I have to get out of Southgate. I can't catch a stray bullet because there have been drive-bys. There had been people crashing into buildings and me pulling bodies out of cars.
What about the kids that are in inner cities?
If I'm talking to somebody, say for instance, if you're involved in gangs, if I'm talking to you and somebody drives by the street, they don't like you and they start shooting you, well, I'm there standing there too. They're not just gonna shoot you, they're gonna shoot me and you. They don't know that I've been out of this or that I never started this. None of them know that. They just know I'm with you, therefore I must be cool with you. Therefore, I gotta go also.
My guest today is Victor Henry, a professional mixed martial artist. Today, he'll explain his background growing up in one of the roughest areas in Los Angeles and how he was able to break out through hard work and not giving up.
I got an opportunity to fight in Japan. Now, when they bring you into a different country, they don't want you to win. They're bringing in a lamb for the slaughter. I said, let's go.
I'm Siama Korami. Welcome to California Insider. Victor, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
It's good to be here, man.
You're a UFC fighter and you're from Southgate. You have an amazing story. You grew up in a very rough neighborhood and then you're now fighting internationally, nationally, across the globe. We want to hear your story. Can you tell us how you started, how you got into this?
Well, originally, I really liked the Power Rangers. And my dad was showing me the old Bruce Lee movies, and I was like, man, I want to be able to do that. And, I wanted to play football at first, but, the way the high school was, my high school was situated, I was supposed to go to a certain high school in a certain area, and my mom was like, no way, because the place I was supposed to go to, I don't know if you could tell, but I'm pretty light-skinned, and the high school I was supposed to go to, they were all Mexican kids, all black kids, and they were not mixing well. There was no harmony within the high school. You had these guys, and they were always at war, at heads, and it was bad, so going into high school, my mom goes, you're not gonna go to these high schools. I said, what about this one across town? She's like, nope, you're not going there either. That's just as bad. I said, okay, so they ended up sending me to a private school. And the only sport that they had in that private school was basketball. And I'm 5'7" as an adult. Basketball is not gonna be well for me. So she goes, well, you're not gonna just do nothing, you're gonna do something. So she hands me the paper for Southgate, and I saw Taekwondo. I said, okay, I want to go do that. And it was just up the street, so I would ride my skateboard to Taekwondo, and I checked it out, and I saw somebody get kicked in the mouth. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. No more football. I want to try doing that. And at the time, it was like $25 a month for 2 classes a week, and that's what I did until I graduated. And I got my black belt, went out, graduated high school, and then started doing jiu-jitsu. And then, at first I didn't even want to fight. It was more of I have an interest in martial arts. I wanted to get my black belt in jiu-jitsu and taekwondo and karate. I just wanted to get all sorts of black belts because it was just fun to do. And my coach at the time goes, you're here all the time anyways. Why don't you just try having a fight? And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And I go out there, and it's like, okay, this guy's gonna try to knock your head off. And I said, okay, yeah, sure. And I go on there, and I knock the guy out in 22 seconds or whatever, and I was like, yeah, that was fun. All right, let's try it again. Well, at the time, I was going to school also. So I was working at Knott's Berry Farm. I was going to school over in Rio Hondo. I was training. I was volunteering at the Taekwondo program so I could just stay busy. So I was doing a lot of things. And it got to the point where I was like, well, school's getting harder. Fighting's getting harder because now I'm fighting higher level people. Something's got to give, right? So I was like, well, as long as I stay responsible, I could always go back to school, but I can never be young enough to start fighting again. So, all right, let's start fighting. And it was a hard decision to make, and my parents, of course, did not support it, but I decided, hey, I'm gonna start fighting anyways. And slowly, from the amateur ranks, started fighting professionally. And
why didn't they support it?
My mom came from a rough background also, and she wanted to see her baby safe. She said, okay, let's I want you to go to school, get your degree, and then go into the workforce because that's the safest, that's the most guaranteed, that's the, I'm not gonna have to see my baby get punched in the face or punch other people. And my father being, he was an illegal immigrant, but then he went through the system and he became legalized, became a citizen. Same thing, he's like, mijo, just, go to school, get your degree, ponte a trabajar, go to work, and, and just be cool. And I was like, it's not what I want to do right now. I want to fight. This is what I want to do now. Once I had that taste, I was like, maybe I should do this more often. So, of course, it was tough because it's not guaranteed. It's not, oh, you have this fight, and you keep graduating. It's, you have to win. It's not, and not only do you have to win, but you have to fight against people who are wanting to win also. I mean, it's not, we're all going to make it together. It's, you got to beat this person, and unfortunately, you got to beat this person down in order for you to elevate your own worth, your own ranking, your own destiny in this. So you got to push other people down. So, and that's what they're trying to do to me inside of a cage when they're trying to fight. So it is what it is, right? So they didn't want that for me. They wanted the safe, the guarantee route, but what I wanted was something more. I didn't, not to knock anybody who has a 9-to-5 because that's hard too, but I just wanted something different. I wanted to be able to travel the world and do this and do that and try different foods, experience different cultures. And I saw fighting as an avenue to do that.
We're covering California issues, as you know. If you want us to cover the stories that are impacting your day-to-day life in California, reach out to me at siamak@californiainsider.com. And they put you in a private school. Was it hard for them to pay for it?
We had help from my aunt. My aunt, my uncle, they were doing pretty well at the time, and they would send money down to this private school. Now, mind you, this private school, it was not, when you think private school, you think proper children being raised in a certain way, and it wasn't really like that. This private school had some good kids. They grew up in the private school system, and they were well adjusted. But then they also had kids that were kicked out of all the other schools, and their parents didn't have time to take them outside of the county because they had working parents also. We're talking about a very low economic, situation here. So it's like, yeah, mijo, I don't have time to go over 2 counties to take you to this one school who might take you. They get kicked out of all the high schools around. They put them into this private school because it's the only one that's left, and that's the only one I can take you to. It's just the only one I have time. So it was filled with a lot of little ne'er-do-wells. Also, some of these kids were, gang members and still active in gangs or on drugs or whatever, but we were all just in that one classroom together. We didn't have periods. We had these books. It was kind of like, it was almost like a continuation school where we had, okay, you have your math, okay, here's your book. You have your geography, all your subjects, you had a book for it. So we're all sitting in this one class. From 9th grade to 12th grade, everybody is in the same classroom doing different work, but everybody's in the same classroom. You have your well-adjusted kids, your shy kids, your gang member kids.
They're all together.
They're all together. You had a problem with somebody, there was no, hey, just ignore them. It was, no, the teacher's like, no, you guys got to figure it out because you're going to be in the same classroom for a year. So what's going on?
And was it hard to not get involved with the gangs? Is it kind of like into your life? And for the kids that are growing up?
Initially, yes. I remember being 8, 9 years old where I grew up in Southgate, and I came in with super high socks, like the cholos were wearing. And my mom goes, what? She hit me. You're not going to do that, blah, blah, blah. And of course, all the older kids that I was looking up to, they were the gang member kids. They were getting into, into rough stuff. The kids I was looking up to were the 16-year-olds, 17. They were looking up to the veteranos, that had been in it for a long time. So it was like a continuous cycle of like the way it happens, right? But I was trying to do that, and my mom just absolutely put a stop to it right away. Smack me upside the head, you're not going to do that, this, that, and the other, whatever. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. As I grew up, because I was the only white kid around, as I grew up, it got easier only because I was being pushed out by almost every group in the area. If I wasn't a black kid, so it was like, you get pushed out because you're not like one of us. Okay, you guys are doing your own thing. The cholos, they would call me sunshine. They would make fun of me, blah, blah, blah. They push me out. So it's like I was getting rejected by everybody. So it's because I was the only little white kid with long hair, by the way. I had long hair down to my butt when I was a kid. They used to call me a girl because I looked like a girl. So I had my own solid little set of friends, maybe 2 or 3 of us, but even then they would get accepted by their groups easier because of their own racial background or maybe their older brothers or whatever. But constantly being, okay, no, you're not part of us. No, you're not part of us. No, you're not part of us. So me as a kid, I'm thinking to myself, well, nobody really likes me for what I am on the outside, so I'm just going to do my own thing. Now, what I've seen a lot of kids do in that situation is they try twice as hard to be accepted, so they do more extreme things. I remember new kids coming into the neighborhood that were kind of in the same situation, and they would just double down and they would do more and more extreme things.
To get into that.
Yeah, to get into the bad life, and I'm just like, that seems like a waste of time to me, man. I mean, like, I just wanted to have fun, skate, play with my friends, maybe play some video games and have fun, be a kid. But these kids were like, no, we got to do this more. And for me, I took more of it doesn't matter what I do because nobody's really going to like me for who I am anyway, so I'm just going to do what I want to do anyways. So I did the things that I found was fun. Skateboarding, and then eventually, of course, martial arts, hanging out with my friends, doing nerdy stuff, playing Pokemon. You know, it was fun that way.
What about the kids that are in Southgate right now, that are in inner cities in California, that may not have a lot of opportunities, you know, that they are kind of getting recruited by the gangs, or is there a way for them to break out?
There is, and it's not easy. I wouldn't say that the opportunities are not there. The opportunities are 100% there. They're always there. The problem is they don't see them. They don't see them as opportunities. What they see them as is distractions. When I was growing, when I was coming up in Taekwondo, I would see the things that was going on, and this person's doing that, this person's doing that, and the very first thing I thought was, I'm too tired from Taekwondo to even do all this stuff. Like, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna do my homework, and I'm gonna go to sleep. Or my mom would be like, 9 o'clock, you gotta be in the house. By 9:30, you better be in bed. Yeah, I remember that was my mom, and I think a lot of the times these kids that are in the inner cities, they see something that can take them out, but then they refuse to get out. It even gets to the point where, man, they have something working for them, and they're either boxing or they're doing some sort of sport, or whatever it is that they're actually excelling in, but then they want to hang on to something, and I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, I just recently lost a friend because of hanging on to the past, and that's the hardest part. I mean, we see it all the time in celebrity culture, where it's like somebody was shot, somebody was this. Well, why was that person shot? Because they almost like they want to retain some sort of semblance of what used to be. It's like, no, you've made it. You're a success. You have X amount. You have millions in the bank. Why are you still doing this? Oh, it's because I gotta remember where I came from. Remembering where you came from is not the issue. You want to be tied to where you came from. You still want to run these streets. You still want to do all these things, and it's not good for you. It can only be bad. It can only be bad. I mean, there's a lot of friends that I have that are still in that kind of life, but anytime I see them, it's, oh, hey, what's going on? I'll have a little conversation with them, but then, you grow up with kind of some street smarts where if I'm talking to one of my friends that's still involved in that life, I make sure that it's behind closed doors.
Is it gang life, essentially? Yeah.
Yeah, because if I'm talking to somebody, say for instance, if you're involved in gangs, if I'm talking to you and somebody drives by the street and they don't like you for whatever reason, somebody drives by the street and they see me with you, but now I'm associated with you. And it's simple as that. Or let's just say they don't like you and they start shooting you. Well, I'm there standing there too. I'm not going to just turn around. They're not just going to shoot you. They're going to shoot me and you. Just because by association, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. They don't know that I've been out of this or that I never started this. None of them know that. They just know I'm with you, therefore I must be cool with you. Therefore, I got to go also. So, there's certain things where you got to develop. It's like, well, that car is coming from this where they're going a little too slow, so I'm just gonna dip behind this. I'm just gonna dip in this business real quick for whatever reason. Or, hey, I saw somebody talking to you and blah blah blah. I'm gonna stay away from that person only because I know what this person is involved with, and I don't want to be involved in that.
So you have to be very careful who you associate with. Is it hard to break out of the past?
It is hard. It is hard to break out of the past because these are people that you're loyal to. These are people that you grew up with. These aren't just some random people. These are your friends. These are your family. These are the people that you've shared life experience with. And it's not always easy to get, to remove yourself from that person. Because at a certain point, you know how they say people grow apart? Well, people grow up and apart. But at the same time, you have regret because, just because you've grown apart doesn't mean you don't still share, hey, we came from this, we came from that, we both struggled together. I mean, even in the gym, if we're struggling together, we are growing a bond together. We're in this gym life together where we've been through fights, and I've seen you leaking out of your head. I've seen you at your worst point, and we've prevailed together. We've got out of that situation. It's same thing for for living in a rough neighborhood. We've made it out of this rough area, or at least we still survived. We survived all the shootings. We've survived the gang fights. We've survived all that. Now you've got yourself, let's just say you got yourself a wife and a couple kids, and you got this job at wherever you got a job at, but you're still living in the hood. And meanwhile, I'm not living here anymore. I'm living, over here, but there's still that friendship. However, I know you still talk to these guys, so I can't really associate myself with you too much because, I could see you and we'll hang out, we'll have dinner, blah, 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 but then it gets to a certain point where it's like, sometimes they think, well, do you think you're too good for us? Do you think that, I'm not worth being seen with in public? It's like, no, man, you're my friend, but I also know you're still involved in all this stuff, and if somebody sees me with you, I'm probably gonna get lit up.
If you like California Insider and you like to know what's going on in California, make sure to check out Epoch Times. This is a newspaper that started by a group of Chinese Americans because of human rights abuses in China, and now is starting to grow here. Make sure to go to the Epoch Times website and check out the California section, where you can get a lot of fresh perspectives on what's going on in California. Now let's go back to the interview. Is it hard for the people that have grown up, now have kids, to completely break out of it?
Is it hard for them to break out of it? Yeah, because again, man,
it's that ingrained into the
it's
society.
Ingrained, and of course, it's like I said, you don't want to feel like you abandoned your friends. Nobody wants to feel like they've left their friends for a not good reason. It's easy to abandon somebody if you feel that they've done you completely wrong, but it's not easy to leave when you feel like somebody has not done anything wrong to you, but just because you can't be around them because you have a career in a certain way, in a certain area. Like for me, my physical health is very important to me. Because obviously, if I go in there with a bullet wound, it's not gonna be very easy, Or if I'm over here and somebody tries to stab me, even if they don't, it's like, oh man, I didn't get stabbed this way, but I got slashed. It's like, well, that's a couple months of rehab or whatever. It's not good.
How much is the gang life there? Is there a lot?
So I grew up in Southgate in the early 90s, and of course throughout the 2000s. And that was during the Rodney King riots. So it was not, there were times where there would be drive-bys and my mom would be like, ooh, they cover me over and it's like, oh, yeah. And then for a long time, at least from what I know, the Mexican gangs, they say no more drive-bys. We're not doing that anymore because, of casualties, Other gangs would continue the drive-bys, or they would just, they did it anyways, But it was big at the time. Now it's a little different. You know, you still have the younger gangs that run around doing like tagging, and they still bang on each other, they still shoot on each other, but I wouldn't say it's as active as it was back then, only because the times are different. Now the criminal world is a little bit different, and it's shifted. I wouldn't say that it's gone, it's just different. Very different.
And how is it different?
You know, of course, with the rise of social media, people are all talk, but then there are those people that are not all talk, and they still run wild in the streets. You know, from what I've noticed, certain cultures still have that, you know, certain I'm gonna shoot you on sight mentality. I haven't seen it too much, only because, of course, I'm gone now. I don't associate with any of that in the streets. But then I still hear my friends, oh, such and such got shot, such and such person got stabbed. Oh, okay, well, this person's on the run, or this person's that. And mind you, all my friends that are my age now, they're either completely out of it, in jail, dead, or still involved in it. And I'm just like, hey, what's up? How you doing, man? I'll see you later. It's good seeing you again. How's your wife? How's your kids? Oh, yeah, they're good, blah, blah, blah. So it really depends on each situation. The ones that are in jail, of course, they're still involved in it because they have their own thing going. The ones that are all out on the street, they're running things a little bit different now because they have family and kids. You know, they're no longer the street soldier because they were before.
How did you make it in martial arts? You know, it's not easy. You were saying like it's just very risky, right?
Yeah.
Your parents thought that this is a very risky.
Yeah.
How did you manage to make it?
Well, I mean, it's either I was very driven or I was too stubborn to quit. You know, I was at a certain point, my amateur record wasn't that great. I got in fights. I did well in some, didn't do well in others. And then my coach now, Josh Barnett, talked to my old coach, and he goes, okay, well, what about doing this? What about doing that? And then my old coach just stopped teaching because he had his own financial problems. And it's not, I mean, mixed martial arts for somebody who's has not already made it is very rough to make it in, you know.
The pay is not.
Yeah, the pay is not,
right?
It's not something you could just make a complete living off of, you know, until you can, you know. I was 15, 16 fights in, still in debt, living in a room. You would think that some people, you know, would make it by then, but no, it's not the same road for everybody. And even then, at this point, I had been traveling. I had been fighting across the world, but still, I was in debt. I was renting a room out of my house. I moved out of Southgate when I was about 28. So I was still living with my mama, trying to make it. And, you know, at a certain point, I was like, I have to get out of Southgate only because I can't be, I can't catch a stray bullet because there have been drive-bys. There had been people crashing into buildings and me pulling, bodies out of cars. I mean, it's not the best environment. I can't be sleeping for a fight or sleeping in order to go train the next morning. And I'm being kept up all night by either shootings or people just crashing cars. It's not an environment that you can do that in, you know. So I was like, I gotta move somewhere. Even if it's just renting a room or renting a space off a couch, I just gotta go. So that's what I did. And to make it, I was like, okay, if this is gonna be the way I'm gonna do things, I gotta do things the way the people that did make it do it. You know, so I talked to my coaches, okay, what do I gotta do? What do I gotta do for this? What do I gotta do for that? What do I gotta do for rest? And they were like, all right, well, you need to find this coach. You need to be able to do your strength and conditioning. You need to have your rest. You need to have your training, your pad work, your drills, all these things you gotta do. I said, okay, I'll do all that. But at the same time, you have to figure out a way to have a job, make enough money so you can eat and you can pay your rent. It's like, well, that's going to be tough because whatever takes away from your training so you could work and live is taken away from the things that you're trying to do. So it's like you're getting pulled in two different directions.
You have to work full time, essentially, or a certain amount of time to make a living, and then at the same time train.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have the time, right? Because the time is going to work, right?
Yeah. So eventually, I got an opportunity to fight in Japan. And they were bringing me in there to fight this guy named Hideo Tokoro. And this was going to be my 7th fight. He had already had 50 fights. Now, when they bring you into a different country, they don't want you to win. This is their guy. They want their guy to win. They're bringing in they're bringing in a lamb for the slaughter. And I remember saying, let's go. Let's go. I want to travel. I want to do this. I want to experience different cultures. And I want, this was exactly what I did. So I went out there, and second round, I got the knockout. I won. I was like, all right, cool, yeah. And the pay wasn't that great either. I mean, it wasn't enough to get out of debt. So I was like, yeah, I don't care. This was about the experience. This was about fighting that guy. This was about being in Japan. This was about this. I was like, okay. They called me again, like maybe a month later. Hey, do you want to fight Masakatsu Ueda, who's even more decorated of a champion, but you're going to get paid less? I said, let's go. And they were like, okay. So I went out there, and it was a hard fight, but I won by submission in the third round. So now they're starting to call me the Japanese killer. And I'm just like, no, don't call me that. I love Japan. I used to watch Pride. I watched all the K1 videos, the different fighting leagues they had back then in Japan. And it's great. I mean, the Japanese fighting scene has been around for so long. Before the UFC, there was Shuto, and my old coach, Eric Paulson, fought there. And, of course, my current coach, Josh Barnett, fought over there, and there's a lot of history over there. So I wanted to be part of that history. I wanted to continue the lineage from American fighters going to Japan and creating a name for themselves. So I was like, don't call me the Japanese killer, man. Like, I like you guys. I want to be here. I want to be here often. So then I ended up getting signed to an organization called Pancras, and did well there. Then eventually I won the deep bantamweight championship over there, and then I started fighting for Ryzen over there, and then the pandemic hit, and it was, but that's what it took. It took me getting out of my, what would be conceived as a comfort zone, not just fighting locally, going out and knowing that you're not the favorite here. We're going to bring you out here so our guy could beat you. And then not only that, but then when you beat our guys, we're going to start not villainizing you, but we're going to create a negative connotation around you so people couldn't want to beat you. But then now it's like, no, no negative connotation. I like you guys. I want to be here as often as possible and represent the fighting spirit of Japan, even though I'm American, but do things in a certain way where it's like, no, like, I like you guys. I want to be here for you guys. I don't want to be anti anybody. I want to be pro fighting, so.
Does that happen? So when you're fighting with someone, you have an opponent, and it's kind of like you said, it's critical. It's like sometimes for your career and for their career. How does it work mentally for you guys? Do you, outside of the fight, are you guys good with each other, or how does it work?
And it depends. Some people like to talk themselves into a corner. They'll talk so much smack that they'll talk themselves like literally into a corner. So the only way to fight to the best of their ability is to be super emotional, and they feel like they have to fight a certain way because they talked so much trash, they've said so much hateful things. It's like, no, I have to come at you 1,000% with anger and emotion, and that's not me. Me, I'm more of those, like, yeah, we're going to get in a fight. And then after the fight, guess what? We're probably going to go home to either our girlfriends or our wives or whatever, and we're going to have barbecue, and we're going to eat, whatever. For me, I like the competition of fighting. It's, you go in there and, for the most part, you have some intent. Okay, I'm going to elbow your face off. I'm going to try to remove your teeth. But then afterwards, okay, hey, we're cool, whatever, bye. That's the way I see it, because it's not, I don't feel hatred for it. What I feel is admiration for it. Like, yes, there is a certain level of aggression that has to go into it, because essentially somebody's trying to take your head off, and they're trying to make a name for themselves off your name, off your head, essentially. But for me, it's like the same thing, but once that fight is over, I have no ill will towards you, or ill will beforehand.
Even if you lose.
Even if you lose. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we both went in here. We signed on that dotted line and go fight each other, and one guy lost, one guy won, and it's just the way it is. See you later. I'll see you on another day. This past trip I had overseas, I went to Japan to train. I was training with one of my old opponents, and we were training, exchanging techniques, and I was like, oh yeah, this, that, and the other. We were training with each other, but I had knocked him out a couple years prior. So it's like, okay, it would be weird of him to be offended at it. He's like, no, we both went in there for the same goal. It just so happened that I won.
And what's that goal?
Well, I mean, for the fight is to win. You know, obviously the final goal of a fight is to win, but it really depends on what kind of fighter you are. Some people want to go in there and just knock your head off. Some people want to go and twist your arm off to get you to submit. Some people just want to go in there and just do just enough to win a judge's decision. They'll hold you or they'll do just enough. But ultimately the goal is to win. Outside of the cage, everybody's got their own thing, you know. When I started fighting, again, it was about me traveling the world, experiencing different things, and being a traveling martial artist. I wanted to see the world. That was the goal, you know. And now I've seen a lot of it. I haven't seen as much as I want to see, so I continue fighting. You know, now I'm making okay money. I can support myself. I can. You know, now that my parents, I've been in a couple magazines and my parents are like, oh, look at this, you know, now they're showing their friends. At first they didn't really support it because they were afraid, but now it's like, oh, look at the magazine my son was in. Look at this, look at that, look at this. So now they're kind of advertising me, but okay, cool, whatever. Ultimately, it's still about fighting for me.
Was there a moment in this process in your journey that you felt like you may want to quit or you may want to give up?
Multiple times. Not that I wanted to quit for, you know, not that I wanted to retire, you know, my hang up my gloves, as they say, but, you know, you have bad training days and you're like, man, is this even for me? You know, or you'll see somebody make it with, and this happened to me a lot, where I had been like I had over 20 fights and I still wasn't in the UFC. I mean, a lot of people they train so hard so they can get in the UFC. But then once you get in the UFC, what happens? So I've always kind of told myself, it's not about the UFC. It's about what you wanted to do in the beginning, which was travel and fight and this and the other. Anytime, of course, like I said, the UFC they're the top guys. They're the ones that are paying the best. So when I still got to make a living, you know. So when I wasn't fighting in the UFC, it was kind of like, no, I have to constantly remind myself it's about traveling, it's about this, it's about that. But then you get this next fight and it's like, oh, you're going to go fight in Russia and they're not going to like you either. You're going to go do this, and it's like, at what point, what do I have to do? What do I have to do in order to make it out, you know, to be where I want to be.
To get into it.
Yeah, to be where I
UFC.
want to be. But then you see other guys that, I mean, I've fought people, I've beaten them, and then I go over and I go fight in super cold Russia, but then I'm watching the UFC and the guy that I just beat is now fighting in the UFC, and I'm just like, well, how did that happen? Like, I beat him, I should be in his place. Why is he there? But you see things like that and it's discouraging, but then you kind of think to yourself, no, this is just what it is. There is no guaranteed journey. There is no guaranteed way of success in mixed martial arts, because essentially it's still the Wild West. You know, it's still the Wild West of making a living, because you don't know. You'd never know.
How did you manage to do that, to overcome that? Because it's kind of discouraging, right? You know, in those times you see somebody else that you beat is doing well and they already achieved what you want to achieve, but then...
It's either, like I said before, man, it's either I don't quit or I'm just too stubborn to quit, man. I mean, at a certain point, I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to fight anyways, because at the end of the day, it's a fight. You know, whether it's a fight in a cage or you're fighting for your livelihood outside in the world, you know, there's a lot of people that look up to me as far as martial arts. There's a lot of people that see me chasing their position. So it's like I'm looking behind me for people that are looking up to me. I can't quit on them. I'm looking forward to the people that are watching me gain momentum on them, and I'm going to have to fight them soon. So they're kind of like, they see me coming. Other than that, it's just, you know, I'm like, no, this is the lot in life that I chose, and I'm going to chase it to the best of my ability for as long as I can. You know, I think about my dad, you know, and the road he's had in order just to become a citizen. And and just hold down a job to raise me and, of course, you know, take care of my mom. And I remember he got a surgery on his ankle, and from Southgate to San Diego, he had to drive a manual transmission 1972 buggy. Wow. And he just had ankle surgery, so he's just, you know, screaming in pain. And I'm just like, well, all I have to do is I have to go train a couple times a day, but he's got to make that drive during traffic. I think I can manage going out and punching somebody in the face. You know, it's something that I claim that I enjoy to do, and it is fun, you know, getting in there and mixing it up with somebody. But, you know, is it as hard as working in a refinery doing asbestos removal? Is it as hard as grinding it out every day doing a 9-to-5 job? Probably not. It's different. But, you know, I think about those things and I'm just like, no, I can't quit. I can't quit on myself when my dad's doing this. You know, so I have somewhat of that work ethic. So I'm just going to keep going.
For those people that want to know how hard is it to get into UFC, how would you get in?
How would you get into the UFC now? Generally what they do is you'll have a few fights on a local promotion. Let's just say you're starting off as a professional. You've had a few amateur fights, now you're starting off as a professional. You'll have a few fights on the local scene, and then you'll get picked up by shows that aren't big, but they're well known especially within the mixed martial arts community. Shows like LFA or, you know, PFL or Ryzen or whatever. I mean, those three are pretty good shows. You'll have a few fights on there, and some of those shows won't pay you as much because what they advertise is screen time. If you're noticed here, then that's just a guaranteed bump into the UFC. However, the UFC nowadays, they're playing less of the recruitment game through those shows, and what they're doing now is, oh, you've earned the right to fight on a exhibition card, which is, you know, they have the Dana White Contender Series now, and if you do that and you do well, you have a chance to win a contract for the UFC. And you know, it's, you know, I have mixed feelings about it because it's kind of like at first they wanted me to fight on the Dana White Contender Series, and I was like, yo, like, I've already had X amount of fights, you know, like, why do I need to do that? And if they would have stuck to their guns, then I would have been like, okay, yeah, let's go. Like, I had to do the Contender Series, and I would have been fighting a guy who has like 7, 8, 9 fights versus my, you know, almost 30 fights, and it would have been
not a good match. Like
it might have not have been a good matchup, you know. But then again, it's a different generation now. These guys are being born and bred and raised into the fighting. And at the time, for me, I didn't get into this for fighting. I got into this because I was fun martial arts. But then it started becoming more serious. Generally now, if people want to make it in the UFC, they have to go through the Contender Series. There are some outliers that they pull in straight into the UFC, and generally what happens from there is that you get pulled into a short notice fight. That's what happened with me. I got pulled into a short notice fight. They wanted me to fight this guy, and they were like, you got 2 weeks. Do you want to fight this guy? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Well, okay. So I went.
So you just got picked too?
Yeah, it was. So what ended up happening was this guy fell out of a fight, and they needed an opponent for this guy because he was like, yeah, we've promised him a fight, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And I only had 2 weeks to prepare for it. And I was like, in fact, I was eating Korean barbecue, and I was stuffing my face, and I was 20 pounds over my weight. And they were like, hey, you want to fight this guy in 2 weeks for the UFC? And I was like, yeah, if it's my way in, then I'll do it. And they were like, all right, where are you at right now? I was like, well, right now I'm eating Korean barbecue. I'm putting it down. So I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I hang up the phone, and my friend's like, what was that? And I'm like, well, I'm fighting in the UFC. And my friend's like, oh, are you kidding, blah, 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 because they're happy for me. And they were like, when? I was like, in 2 weeks. And they were like, what? What are you doing? And I was like, I'm eating. Like, what? He's like, bro, you got 20 pounds to lose. I was like, yes, I do. And I kept eating. I made the weight, but then this was during the funny time of COVID where people were putting on shows, but then you had these certain regulations that you had to go through. So I get to the UFC. I fly in. They give you a COVID test. I pass. I said, okay. Then throughout the week, they give you another COVID test. Okay, I passed. Well, then after you weigh in, so you weigh in. I lost all that 20 pounds. I weighed 135. I say, okay, now take a COVID test. That COVID test came out as false positive. And they were like, no fight. And I was like, oh man. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, they're just gonna kick me out. They're like, that was my opportunity. And they said, no, we've been experiencing this. And they were good to me. They were saying, we've been experiencing this. It's just the way it is. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna see what happens. But you're in the UFC. I said, fine, okay, good. So then, of course, since it was a false positive, what did I do when I got home? I isolated for 2 weeks because I didn't want to go and if I am positive, give it to my training partners and then screw up their opportunities. So I'm in my apartment and I'm just kind of chilling and okay, whatever. 2 weeks had passed. Okay, I take a test. I'm negative. Okay, good. I go train again. One of my first days, they were like, "Hey, you want to fight in Anaheim?" I was like, "Yeah, when?" 2 weeks. Again, too, same guy. I said, okay. So I came up off the couch into a 2-week training camp, made weight, fought the guy, and had one of my biggest fights in my life, and I won. And not necessarily my hometown, but close to my hometown, Anaheim, and that was my road to the UFC. Now, I've seen people that just kind of like, oh yeah, I had 5, 6, 7 fights. They were 7-0, and they just got picked up by the UFC because they know a guy who knows a guy. Okay. There's other people that...
But this was after Japan, right?
This was after Japan. For a while, I fought in Japan, and I was fighting in Japan's Premier League called Rizin. And I had 2 fights there, and I had finished both of those fights by either a knockout or submission. And I was like, I want to make a title run. I want to win their title. And then COVID hit, and it was the height of COVID. It was the beginning. It was isolation. Nobody's going outside. No businesses are open, nothing's going on, and let alone international travel. And then when they started putting on fights again, I was like, yo, get me back in there. And they were like, well, we're not really bringing anybody in because Japan has, their government has certain quarantine rules. If you're gonna come into the country, you gotta quarantine for at least 2 weeks. Generally speaking, if you are flying into a different country, they pay for 4 or 5 days of your hotel because, you got to land there, get acclimated. I don't know how acclimated you can get in 2 days, but then you still got to...
Especially with a different time zone.
Yeah. So, you do that. But I was like, okay. And Rizin was only willing to pay for 5 days as far as for your hotel. And I was like, what if I come in and pay for the rest of the time that I got to quarantine? So let me go ahead and pay for the week and a half or whatever that I gotta be quarantined, and then you guys just foot the rest for the 5 days. And they were like, no, because the visa that you gotta apply for is different. I was like, well, I guess I'm just out of luck with this one. So what can I do? So then this whole UFC thing happened, and I was like, well, okay, well, let's go for it.
Before we continue, we would like to thank Shenyun for sponsoring this channel. I lived in China for 2 years and experienced 2 different Chinas. One is the China we know now, unfortunately with communism. And the other is ancient Chinese culture with 5,000 years of history, strong values, ethics and morality that has been lost. Shenyun Performing Arts is reviving this 5,000 years of Chinese traditional culture. It takes you back in time to magical world of ancient China with a unique blend of brilliant dancing, beautiful costumes, and legends coming to life. Go to shenyun.com to find out the schedule and theater information. It's a lifetime experience you don't want to miss.
Just so inspiring. It makes me want to go dance.
Breathtaking. I was very impressed. I'm taking my program and I'm going to mention it on the news because I think it's a great performance and people should see it.
What I loved about the show was the authenticity of it. It was taking me on a journey.
Exceptional. The technique involved, that the thousands of hours of training.
People just float. Everything was exact, and then they worked to the exact moment, and it was beautiful.
You go away feeling with a smile in your heart from it.
Have to come. Life-changing.
Make sure you see it. Make sure you see it.
Don't wait. Get your tickets now.
Now, Victor, do you have a message for young people that look at your story and see you as somebody that came from the community, the inner cities?
I would say pick your chariot. Pick your chariot and just and ride it like it's your chariot, man. I mean, for me, it was fighting. You know, other people, I know everybody doesn't want to just punch somebody in the face. It's just me and my weird self, right? People want to experience what they want to experience. I'm okay with that, of course. But once you have that thing in your life that you like and you have a passion for it, and it doesn't matter what all those all the distractions are, but this is the thing that you enjoy the most. Once you find that thing, immerse yourself in it. Immerse yourself in it, in what it is, what it could be, and what it was. What I mean by that is, I'll use myself as an example. I saw fighting, and I was like, wow, that's something that I might be able to do. And then once I got put into it, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is different than what I thought it was. And then I looked to the future of it, and I was like, well, this is what could be. You know, like, I see this guy fighting in a certain way, but I think I could do it better than him. And then you look at the past of what it used to be. Oh, this is where people came from. Yeah, this was the beginning of it. Like, I remember when I started doing my research on old UFC, it was 1993, and I would see people like, you know, Gerard Gordeau just kick somebody in the freaking face, you know, and their tooth fly off into the first row, and you're like, whoa, what is this? But then it was like style versus style, and that was the original, you know. And then of course, you kind of start going into the timeline of things. Okay, people started becoming more of a mixed martial arts. Now, this striker can wrestle a little bit, but I was like, well, what happened before 1993? Oh, now you're going into the 80s. Okay, well, this is what they did. They did headbutts. They did, you know, people would just meet each other in a gymnasium. I mean, my coach would tell me all the time about how he would be on the internet when it first started and be like, yeah, you want to meet up at this gymnasium? And we'll set the rules now. I'll come in and I'll weigh this, and we'll just have ourselves a fight. And people will just agree, yeah, totally. Let's go. And they'll just have themselves a fight in the middle of a gymnasium. Could you imagine you're playing, you know, basketball, and all of a sudden these two big gorillas come in, and they're just gonna, hey, don't mind us. We're just gonna stand over here and
fight,
and they're just gonna beat each other senseless, and you're just bouncing a basketball, and these headbutts, elbows, you know, joint locks, and okay, if I tap, that means I give up and you win. Okay. And that used to be before that. And then what was it before? But then again, you look at human history, we've always had a fascination towards fighting and some sort of conflict, especially when it comes to this bare hands, me and you, let's just go. Let's just see what happens.
If people want to get into UFC, do you have any messages for them?
Yeah, join your local wrestling program. Join your local wrestling. Find a wrestling program. Learn what it is to be physically exhausted and have to keep going. Of course, there are other programs like boxing, karate, traditional martial arts. You can do all that. However, I feel that the wrestling program keeps you away from more head injuries as a kid, because of course boxing, you got to beat on each other's brains for a little bit. But also you learn more about your body in a wrestling program. You know, they have you do a bunch of gymnastics as a warm-up. You learn how to subdue people. And then eventually get into the striking arts. That would be my suggestion. You know, learn about your own body, your own physicality, your own limitations. Once you know about your own body and things, then you can go forward into, man, maybe this is for me. Because I'll tell you what, there is no closer feeling to dying and being than being either drowning or tired in wrestling. Those are the two closest things that it feels like, man, that's it. Because you have to put yourselves in those situations when you're fighting. Because there have been times where I've been in fights and, man, my arms feel like they're numb. My legs can barely stand. I feels like I'm falling over, but I still got somebody right in front of me trying to punch and kick me, and I got to be in their face because I got to punch and kick them back. And if I feel like if I would have had a better wrestling background, then I would have more of an understanding of what that feels like. But now that, of course, I've been fighting for a long time, I understand what that feels like. But for a young person to go through that and know what fatigue is and know what it is to persevere through fatigue and through physical advertisement, then yeah.
Does that teach you when to quit? You know, when to say, okay, I lost this, I want to give up. Or
yeah, it teaches you
the limits, right?
It teaches you why to quit. Because sometimes if you're just tired, then you don't give up. If you're just tired, then you don't give up. But if something is hurt, your legs like, oh no, like my kneecap is over here, or my elbow is bending back the wrong direction, now's the time to quit, because that's not good. But if you're just tired, then there ain't no quitting. I've been in the gym a lot of times where people are just tired. They'll tap out. I'm like, no, there is no such thing as that here. You know, you hit them in the liver. You know, my coach, I've been sparring him, and it'll be at the very end of the round. And this is a funny story. I remember one time we're sparring, and he throws a knee right to my liver, and I block it. And I said something stupid like, "Is that how you got, punk?" or whatever. And he goes, "Oh yeah," and he goes, "Brah," and he hits it even harder. I still block it, but my elbow goes into my liver, boom, and I just sunk right there. And the bell rang because it was the end of the round. And I'm like, oh, okay, he's gonna stop. Boom, and he just kept hitting me, and I was like, ah! And I'm like, the round's over. He goes, "This isn't over until you get up." So he just kept hitting me, and of course I'm struggling because my liver is going, it's spasming, and it feels like my body is shutting down, and I'm just like, ah! So I'm trying to get up. Of course, my body is, every cell in my body is telling me, lay down, idiot, because your body is telling you that you gotta survive. Lay down and just chill. But you gotta mentally just check in and be like, nope, I gotta get up. So sure enough, I finally get up, I escape, and my coach goes, okay, good. And I look over to the time, there's only 5 seconds left in the break. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, back at it. Go.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, man, I mean, when you are used to that, where you're used to, okay, there is no quitting. This is make it now. This is do it now. It's not, I can do it tomorrow. This is not, I'm gonna do it 30 seconds from it. It's do it now. That's when it counts. And that's what, you know, it's...
Is it because you could lose everything if you lose right there?
You could lose everything, man. I mean, generally within a professional fight, you're either given 15 minutes because you're 3 5-minute rounds, or you're given 25 minutes if it's a championship round. I mean, a championship fight. But that fight that you're having right now is never going to be here again. Never. You know, you can always fail a test, come back again and do it again. Maybe next year, maybe next month, whatever. You can always go, study, come back. You can always do that. But there are very few things in life where it's now or never. And fighting is one of those things. Because I can never just go back I can never go back in time and fight this guy again. Because once that win or that loss goes on your record, that's it. It's there. If you fight that guy again in a rematch, well then that's that fight. It's not going to take away the other one. So that's where that mentality comes in, where it's like, no, it's now or that's it. Live with it for the rest of your life, whether you decide that this is going to be the end, whether you quit because of that, or whether you decide that, no, I'm going to try my best, and even if I lose, but I gave it my best, and you end up, I mean, it could be in the UFC at least, it could be lucrative. I mean, you can have a fantastic fight with somebody and still lose, but then the promotion would be like, you know what, that was fight of the night. Here's 50 grand. So at least there's some solace. But here's the thing, I don't know any fighter who would say, I'll take that 50 grand and accept that loss, or would you rather give that 50 grand back and take a win? Most fighters, I don't know any fighters that wouldn't take that deal. They would gladly give that 50 grand back, take that win, because that win is more valuable to them, because it's an honor system. It's an honor thing. It's no, I beat this person. There's no feeling that can beat that.
Victor Henry, UFC fighter, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Good. It's good to be here, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you.